Good afternoon. It's Friday the 9th of December, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and pleased to say joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen. Welcome back, Patrick.
Oh, it's wonderful to be back, Mike.
Is it? Good stuff, yeah. It's
Definitely
sunny Plymouth, yeah.
Weather's a bit dicey, but...
Bit dicey, yeah. And we've got Vanessa Beeley joining us today as well. Welcome, Vanessa. We're going to get kicked off here, though, with the latest statistics about the NHS, because, of course, it's not going very well, is it? So this is the British Medical Association and their NHS Backlog data analysis. And they're saying this is analysis of monthly data releases by NHS England to highlight the growing backlogs across the NHS, including operations data, cancer waiting lists, GP referrals, and A&E waiting times. So let's just look at the backlog in terms of elective surgery, first of all, and see how this has gone. Patrick, well, first of all, we can see that their backlog was growing for years up until the so-called pandemic began. But obviously since then, the steepness of the graph has increased somewhat. So now we are at, as of October 22, 7.21 million people waiting for elective surgery. But it doesn't end there. Let's go back to emergency department attendances and waits. So the graph on the left is attendances. And basically we can see that aside from the dip as a result of the so-called pandemic and people being encouraged to stay at home, that's been pretty static across the months. But what has not been static is the 12-hour plus wait time from decision to admission. And that is unbelievably serious. I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
Well, not only that, but I think a lot of people will find themselves, even if they do take that wait time, Mike, and this is what we hear a lot from people, that they'll go through the whole process, even at the A&E level, and still not actually get the treatment or the procedure or whatever which they intended to get or be seen to for the condition that they were meant to be seen for.
Right.
So there's that too. So there's a lot of problems with NHS service at the point of delivery.
So as we were pointing out in the week then, the government decided that the best thing to do was to use the private sector to try to cut the backlog. So they're intending to outsource much more treatment. But in fact, the BMA is saying this isn't necessarily going to work. Sorry, let's just bring this back. The extent, they say, to which private hospitals will be able to take on NHS waiting list initiatives going forward is unclear, given the increasing demand in the self-pay market and the backlog of private sector patients. So there's a backlog even in the private sector. Given that the NHS and the private sector largely draw on the same pool of doctors, additional capacity may be less than it initially appears. This was made clear in the 2020 block booking arrangements, which saw NHS gain facilities rather than workforce to run them. This is, at the end of the day, it seems, a personnel availability problem more than anything else.
Yeah, and I don't know if we'll comment on this later, Mike, but you said that this is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? There's all the people that aren't even seeking care for various reasons, or people who have just been completely put off or for whatever reason because of what's been going on over the last 2 years. So, I mean, the numbers really are by magnitude bigger than what those graphs are showing.
Indeed. Now, so where does that take us in terms of infertility, for example?
Well, this is the big issue, and this isn't specifically to do with talking about vaccines, Michael, though a lot of people have made allusions to this fact with the risks of infertility for male and female with the vaccines, but that's not what this is about. So this is interesting. There's some studies that have been done regarding male fertility in recent years, and Mike, the picture is really dark, and it's getting worse. And we want to point to this here. I know I referenced that film Children of Men. That I believe that was 2006. Yeah, Clive Owen.
Yeah.
Clive Owen, the star of that. So it was about the end of human reproduction. Literally people stopped having kids and they had no idea why, what brought that on. So 18 years passed, no new babies globally. So it's a science fiction film, it's a dystopian film, but is there some truth to this? Well, look at this national pulse here, Spermageddon, they're calling it in this article. Humanity may be functionally infertile by 2050, new study warns. So this is interesting. Massive decline in sperm counts are a global problem, according to new research that has evident implications for the survival of the natural human race. Current trends in sperm counts, if extrapolated suggest as early as 2050, the species may have trouble reproducing. What does that mean exactly? It means this. Researchers have further corroborated prior information gained on sperm counts in North America, Europe, Australia, revealing the decline in sperm counts is mirrored in the South as well, in Central America, in Asia, in Africa too. China's experienced a negative birth rate. India, negative birth rate. They're not having a high enough birth rate to meet replacement on population. So this isn't just a European and a North American issue or a first world issue. This is global. And look at this. The median man will have a sperm count of 0, meaning that 1/2 of all men will produce no sperm at all, and the other half will produce so few as to be functionally infertile. That's the important term, Mike. Functionally infertile. That means that you'll have a range, but the median is going to be 0. That means 2050, this spermageddon or this children of men situation could become a reality. Nobody wants to talk about this. This is hugely uncomfortable issue to talk about. Do you see any politicians talking about this? Are they interested in talking about it? This is kind of an existential problem for humanity. What else is more important? I don't know. Maybe climate change. What do you think? I mean, this is real. So all we can talk about is climate change. So I don't know. I watched that film, Mike, years ago, and it left a heavy mark on a lot of people who watched it.
Of course, also the basis of The Handmaid's Tale, if anybody wants to watch popular culture and see this type of subject being tackled.
Yeah.
But let's move to China then finally on this subject, Patrick. And the question is, has China begun implementing its relaxation of COVID-0?
Well, this is interesting. So this has been a big damaging issue for Xi Jinping and the Central Party. Okay, so they are lifting restrictions. They're relaxing restrictions a little bit. The good news is the market has reacted. Investors are reacting positively. They're moving back towards doing business with China on this because it was an impossible environment. But what are they really proposing here? So instead of lockdowns, massive lockdowns, now they're moving to targeted lockdowns. So instead of whole cities or whole districts within a city, you're talking about apartment buildings or floors within an apartment building. So they're still doing this targeted lockdown, shorter lockdowns, so instead of longer periods, shorter, briefer periods, and they're only closing roads and major thoroughfares for what they would deem extreme emergencies. So they used to give the local prefect the authority to make these sort of broad sweeping lockdown anti-COVID measures, and now the Central Party stepped in and said, you guys can't do that, only if it meets certain thresholds. And so they're also relaxing the health code. So China has that pass on the smartphone with WeChat app, and where it's a traffic light system. So now they're relaxing the health code system. So you're allowed to self-isolate if you're an asymptomatic case. Before, even an asymptomatic case had to go to the government field hospital or the COVID camp. And so now that's been relaxed. So they are pulling back, but all the restrictions are still there. They're still there. They've just been dialed down and localized. Okay. So that's interesting. So I think people should pay attention to what's going on in China, because it could be reflected in our policy too if our governments still want to press these buttons. Okay.
If you like what the UK column does, you would like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us there. You could pick something up at the UK column shop, but we just would like to say that with the way that the postal strikes are going, another strike today, then things are getting increasingly dodgy about whether we'd be able to get stuff to people by Christmas, and we're hearing very disturbing tales of what's going on in post office sorting offices, so you may want to consider that, but also please share the material on the various platforms. And then another reminder that tomorrow we have the 5th Doctors for COVID Ethics Symposium on the UK column and other places, but watch on the UK column if you can. It's going to be a great event. Please join us for that. Begins at 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. And finally, just a brief reminder that David Scott is hosting another short symposium on Thursday, the 15th, starting at 4:30 p.m. Entitled Education, Not Indoctrination. More details about that on Monday. Now, Yesterday, I was speaking to David Fleming, who is from the COVID-19 Assembly. He started a new initiative to try to get people re-engaged on getting out and organising and so on. I just began yesterday by asking about that, and let's have a listen to what he said.
As you say, I worked together and Covid19 Assembly, and all along my idea has been to get the word out to people. I mean, if you look at the graphics on the Covid-19 website, you see that they're all about people spreading information in local areas. So I just want to take that a step further. We want to get people to the average person to sign up on a sort of a very simple binary decision, like, do you want a good future for your family or a bad future for your family? Now, obviously, most people say good future, and we genuinely think that we need to get people's attention on the bad future that's been sort of foisted upon us by unelected people or whatever. So we get people to realize that the future that's been built for us by default is actually a bad future, and we want to show them that we can work together to have a better future. So the plan is to just get out there and get the information out to people, because I mean, when I think of people I know, who aren't, thinking the way we do, they just don't know this stuff. I mean, even after all this time, 2.5 years or longer in other cases like climate or whatever, they just don't know the information. And whenever it is presented to them, it's framed as conspiracy theories or whatever. So we just need to get the word out to people. And the idea is that we're not going out there, speaking to strangers. It's designed so that people will have conversations with people they already know and trust. So it'll be friends, families, and everybody talking to each other. So the biggest part of the plan is that we will literally get leaflets in houses, every house in the country, every week if possible, on information that's key to all this. And that will, I know most leaflets go in the bin, but some of them will stick, and some people will think about them. It will make people think, ask questions, and then friends, family, neighbors, work colleagues who already um, are on our side will be there to just speak to them and answer the questions if they have questions. And it'll be a slow process, but hopefully it'll grow rapidly and spread quickly from a small beginning.
But you're aiming for a sort of a mass process. You're looking for a lot of people to get signed up.
Yeah, the idea is that, I mean, it's a two-stage process. Right now, we're in the process of getting people already on our side together in working on this, and then we'll get volunteers from that to go out on the street delivering leaflets, getting the message into homes, and then it'll grow from there. So some people will sign up as well, and it'll just go from there and grow bigger. I've worked out quite a good plan on how to get things out there and how to make it sustainable, to make people I mean, leaflets are relatively cheap, so it can be crowdfunded by just a few volunteers each time to get the leaflets out there. So it's not money isn't the biggest problem or anything. It's just getting people out there. So I mean, we're starting small, but hopefully it'll grow quickly. I know there's a lot of people out there who are already interested. I mean, we've had thousands of people sign up already, so it's the plan is it's going to work. We're going to test it soon in Oxford. We're going to go to Oxford and have a day there the first week of January. Based around the 15-minute neighbourhoods that they've announced, just to get the word out there to people that this is part of something bigger, and it'll show how we can work.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. Now, I've noticed on the website there are some well-known names have already sort of put their faces to this. So who's signed up already?
Well, yeah, Ryan Fulmish is behind us, Mike Eden, Tess Laurie, there's loads of people, Majid Nawaz, we've Patrick Wood, who's great on technocracy and that. So yeah, if you go to the website at notourfuture.org, you can see who's on board. But yeah, we've got a growing list of well-known people. I mean, I wanted from the start to get people from all across, COVID, climate, economy, just to get to show people that this is more than just COVID. I mean, that's what, and even more than climate. So we want to get people in there who are focused on the money side of things as well, which is obviously crucial to all this.
Are people able to sign up already for the effort in Oxford in the first week of Jan?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things you can do on the website. You can sign the pledge, and the idea is that it's a pledge between people. It's not a petition. I don't like petitions. We're not asking authority for favors. So sign the pledge, or there's a volunteer form if you want to, offer your services to manage a team, deliver leaflets, that kind of thing. And that's where you would sign up for the Oxford thing, just through that. Once we know your postcode, we know where you are, so we know you're in Oxford, so you can sign up for that. But for Oxford, you don't have to be part of the Oxford. You don't have to live in Oxford at the moment. We don't mind if people come from anywhere in the country for that one, because it's going to be big. Because usually the plan is that we'll deliver leaflets over a week, say, for instance, in a town. Whereas for Oxford, we want to do it all in one day. So we do want lots of people to come along and join in for the day and go from there.
Okay, so if anybody would like to get involved with that, it's notourfuture.org, and you can see the Freds have already got signed up for that. But of course, he was talking there about the 15-minute city initiative in Oxford. We pointed this out a couple of days ago. Traffic filters will divide the city into 6 15-minute neighbourhoods, agrees Highways Councillor. This is what they were talking about, people being able to drive freely around their own neighbourhoods, but would need to apply for a permit to drive through the filters. Now, many people were suggesting that this meant physical barriers. Oxford County Council have decided that they felt that they need to clarify that situation. So this is what they're saying in an updated article in Oxfordshire Live. Contrary to the viral article's claims, there are no physical barriers. The restriction zones will be monitored by automatic number plate recognition cameras that are going to be placed in various places. Everyone in the city will be accessible by car, although some private car drivers may need to use a different route, is the quote from the council. When they are operating, private cars will not be allowed through without a permit. All other vehicles, including buses, coaches, taxis, vans, mopeds, motorbikes and HGVs, will be allowed at all times. So that's okay then, isn't it, Patrick?
Well, what about electric cars? What if I've splashed 30,000 quid on a Tesla? Do I get to go through?
No.
Really?
No.
So that's not green enough?
No.
Wow, that is a real kick in the teeth, isn't it?
Well, what's happening in Switzerland?
Well, how green are the electric cars? Well, the Swiss have a little bit of a problem, Mike. Charging these electric cars and filling up these lithium batteries are a little bit of a pull on the grid. So Switzerland is now considering electric vehicle ban to avoid blackouts. Can you believe this?
Yes.
So there's the Tesla pulling up to charge there to pull that green energy, that coal-fired and natural gas-fired green energy, and fill up that lithium battery. So this is going to become a problem, Mike. Imagine if everybody had electric cars. What do you think that would be like in terms of taxing the energy grid?
We have been talking about this for quite some time, and of course the energy grid will not be able to support it.
Yeah, and so this is just Switzerland. This is just Switzerland. What's interesting about Switzerland, Mike, where do they get their electricity from?
France?
Well, they used to. They used to. France used to be a net exporter of power.
Yep.
But because of green energy policies and McKinsey and company taking over the bureaucracy, Emmanuel Macron has decided to try to denuclearize France, which is really a genius thing to do considering that is their main source of power. And they were exporting. So here's Macron now. And check this out. So he's demanding that people stop spreading fear, panic about the potential of blackouts this winter. He's saying, stop the panic. It's not going to happen. We've got it all under control. RTE, the state energy institutions, got it all under control. And here's Macron. We are a great country. We have a great energy model. Actually, maybe you did. We will hold on this winter despite the war. You see, invoking the war there. So all of this is because of Putin and Ukraine. Okay. So I ask everyone to do their job. He's telling we need to be sober. He's using that term, sober as a country. He uses that term quite a lot. The only problem here, Mike, is that what Macron is saying is very much at odds with what the heads of the power companies are saying here. Energy rationing and shortages are likely in France, admits RTE chief, electric grid chief there. And this is reported by Breitbart. So a little bit of a problem there in terms of consistency. So he's saying, everyone calm down. I think you're looking at a very desperate politician in Emmanuel Macron. And so he's just becoming more and more unpopular by the day. And so, well, he managed to escape certain death in the last election cycle. But
political death, you're talking
political
about.
death,
Yes.
but he has no mandate at all, not even close.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see that reflected in the opposition from the people when they start taking to the streets again this winter.
Okay, well, let's welcome Vanessa onto the program. Last Vanessa, and we're going to get kicked off here with Angela Merkel.
Yeah, this was an interview that Merkel did for Zeit Media in Germany, I think a couple of days ago. And basically, this was reported in RT. Merkel has admitted deception over the Minsk peace deal. And then reading from the text in the article in an interview with Zeit magazine published on Wednesday, Merkel said that the Minsk protocol brokered by Germany and France was an attempt to give Ukraine time, which it used to become stronger, as evidenced on the battlefield now. Of course, that also means that gave NATO time to build up its own military bases and to send weapons into the Ukrainian forces, including, of course, the neo-Nazi forces of the Azov and Ida and various other battalions. She was referring to the first of the two documents known collectively as the Minsk Agreements that were designed to help Kiev reconcile with rebels in the east, in Donbass, who had rejected the outcome of the US-backed armed coup in Kiev 2014. But what is interesting, in the Zeit interview, Merkel stated that Russia could easily have overrun Ukrainian troops in 2015, adding that she doubted that NATO countries could have done as much then as they do now. So effectively, she's saying, and I have to say, this reminds me very much of, for example, the Syrian Arab Army and Russian Liberation Campaign in East Aleppo in 2016, which, if people remember back then, was constantly halted by the UN, i.e. the US and UK and EU cabal, calling for ceasefires in order to allow the armed groups dominated by Al-Qaeda to regroup and be rearmed with weapons that were coming in, often with UN so-called humanitarian convoys into eastern Aleppo. So this reminds me very much of that situation. Then we had Maria Zakharova from the Russian Foreign Ministry immediately after seeing the interview with Merkel, and she said basically in one of her press briefings, what Merkel said in her interview is the testimony of a person who directly stated that everything that was done in 2014 and 15 had one goal: to divert the view of the world community from real problems, to play for time, to pump up the Kiev regime with weapons, and lead the matter to a big conflict. Zakharova has also basically said that she considers Merkel's remarks to be legitimate evidence of foul play that will be investigated by the War Crimes Tribunal that has been established by Russia.
And Vanessa, this sort of really undermines the Western narrative that they keep the big talking point across the media. This is a war of choice by Putin, and this active aggression, as if the timeline of history began on February 25th, 2022. Yeah. But this is actually the key point, isn't it? Minsk, the peace process, was there, was available, but wasn't seen through, and it looks like
it
even
wasn't
worse
genuine. Yeah, it wasn't genuine, basically. I think that is what Merkel is saying, and it's kind of interesting because of all the German leaders that I would have expected in a way to be more sympathetic towards Russia and to have pivoted towards Russia during her leadership. I don't know if you agree, Pat, would have been Merkel. So it's kind of interesting that she's coming out with this statement now that effectively, as you say, undermines the NATO narrative in Ukraine. interesting.
Well, I think to that I would add, to Vanessa and Mike, I would add that if Merkel was so anti-Russian, well, clearly not, but she wouldn't have signed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline agreement and moved forward with such a big joint project. But the juggernaut of politics and outrage and everything over the last 12 months, I think is too much for any Western politician to bear. But now, with a little bit of distance and as things are settling into a very dark place for Ukraine, I think a lot of people are speaking up. A dark place for Europe too this winter, not figuratively speaking either.
Well, good news, Patrick, because Vladimir Zelensky is the person of the year.
That's right. That's right. People always complain about this show, Mike, say it's all bad news. It's not all bad news, folks. This is a feel-good story. Time magazine has awarded their Person of the Year, formerly Man of the Year, that's not politically correct, Person of the Year, to none other than Volodymyr Zelensky, or if you speak Russian, Vladimir Zelensky. But he has, you notice Time's using just one I on the end. He has two Y's in Vogue and all the other, that's a marketing exercise. But anyway, let's not digress. So he's been given the big award here. So this is the most influential person in the world, according to Time magazine. And here he is here. Let's take a look at the cover, Mike. There it is. You can see him looking pensive and somewhat bewildered at this kind of cast of characters around him. So it's not just Vladimir Zelensky, Mike. It's also the spirit of Ukraine the spirit of Ukraine is also the co-beneficiary of this year's award. So look at that. Isn't that interesting? Like, who are all these people? One of them actually caught my eye, Mike, and it's this one here. Like, who is this guy? That's a familiar face. I looked at that and I thought, I know that face. I know that face. Where do I know that face? Let's blow that up a little bit. Who is this man? And it's none other, Mike, than the British, the famed war zone physician, Dr. Knott. Why is he on the cover of Time, right in Zelensky's ear? Right there. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And so we had to dig, well, yeah, that's the standard press image there. There he is, Royal Society of Medicine, Dr. David Knott. And just to refresh people's memories, we have a clip of him visiting East Aleppo in 2014, doing a sort of returning to where he used to work in the hospital. And we'll comment after this. I'm sure Vanessa has a few things to say about this gentleman and his exploits in Syria, but go ahead and roll this.
Homes.
Oh yeah. So now we're on top of one of the hospitals where I worked last year, and you can see it was barrel bombed. There were 2 barrel bombs, one dropped here and one dropped over there on top of the hospital to try and destroy it. So last year I was saying that that the hospital was attempted to be destroyed, but this year you can see the destruction. I remember having my photograph taken, remember?
I advise not to
stay up here too long.
Yeah, too dangerous there up there on the roof. So that's Dr. Knott, and so he's known as this guy who goes to war zones and operates on the wounded in war zones. The only problem is, Mike, he only operates on one side of the conflict, and it's usually the side of NATO, whether it's in Syria or Libya or in wherever, Bosnia.
Yeah.
So this is why he's famous. He's got a big foundation. Again, why is he on the cover of Time next to Zelensky? Well, he's been doing, I guess, this work in Ukraine as well. Take a wild guess which side of the conflict he's on and who he's working on. But Vanessa, you know, he shot to fame in our eyes when he claimed, I think it was on a BBC report, that he had to instruct surgeons by Skype because it was too dangerous, but that the Russians hacked the Skype call, got the location, the GPS location, and then bombed the M10 hospital in East Aleppo. Is that the name of the hospital? I believe that we visited that hospital, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was directly opposite a Nusra Front headquarters and a White Helmet headquarters that were shared facilities, of course, as they were throughout Syria. But also the really, the kind of the major story that broke with Dr. Knott, if you remember, was back in, I think it was 2012 or 13, the story of the Syrian Arab Army sniper who had managed to kill a fetus in a pregnant woman's belly, and the X-ray image of the bullet in the fetus head from inside the woman's stomach was published all over the BBC, The Guardian, The Times, before, of course, being completely debunked by genuine medical professionals who said, this is entirely impossible. Had the bullet entered a fetus's brain through the woman, you wouldn't have the intact womb, and also the fetus would be disintegrated, and you wouldn't have the bullet in perfect form in the fetus's head. I mean, it's insane. But of course, people suspend disbelief. But Knott also, of course, established Medics Under Fire, which also included Hamish de Bretton Gordon of the fridge bomb fame, and the amplification of the chemical weapon narratives in Syria, close friend of James LeMessurier, who established the White Helmets. But also in Medics Under Fire was Toby Cadman, the UK FCO-funded lawyer that is contracted to basically bring war crimes charges against President Assad. And I think her name is Dr. Sayela Hassan, who was, I could have that name completely wrong,
I think that's right.
who was, of course, involved in British BBC Panorama saving Syria's children. So there you go. That's a small part of Dr. Knott's fraudulent pedigree, basically. I can't think of any other way to put it.
Well, he's a national treasure, according to the BBC and others. So he's widely revered and made it to the cover of Time, which is another great achievement for the good doctor there. Let's take a look at that cover again, though, Mike. And there's been a few revisions to this cover, as you might imagine, in the memsphere. Let's take a look at this. A little bit of a transition, metamorphosis, and you get this. This is circulating Grifter of the Year, Vladimir Zelensky, and the Nazis of Ukraine. And it's a very different cast of characters, as you can see, surrounding Vladimir, and he looks like he's been in a snowstorm or something. Sean Penn's there on hand, just on the bottom left-hand side. You've got everybody: Victoria Nuland, Hillary Clinton, Angelina Jolie, Biden, of course, Pelosi, and then a whole host of Nazi Azov battalion fighters there. So it's very interesting. So people are pastiching this, and this is another version here. This is Vladimir Zelensky and Sam Bankman-Fried, a sort of hybrid character there. Vladimir Bankman is the man of the year, person of the year there. So laundering money in Ukraine, you get the joke. It's not really funny because it's true. Yeah. So what happened, Mike? I posted that cover on my Facebook page yesterday. I was so excited about this award for Zelensky. I thought, I want to post this on my Facebook page, and just kind of, I didn't really cheer it on. I criticized it. And so someone asked in my thread, Mike, they said, didn't Adolf Hitler get Time's Man of the Year as well? And I said, of course he did. And I posted a JPEG of a Time magazine cover from 1938 of Adolf Hitler, and my account got suspended for another 60 days. So that's after just getting back on Facebook after being off for the last 6 months. And so look at that. There we go. There's my various restrictions there. But I've seen this image on other people's. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying I'm being targeted. But I have seen that image on many other people's accounts and still circulating to this day. So unfortunately, this issue is being very tightly policed on social media. Facebook is whitewashing Nazism in the Ukraine, and that's the bottom line, and that's the real joke of it all, and the community standards at Facebook.
Okay, well, if big media organizations are supporting Zelensky in Ukraine, there's also fundraising going on in the fashion industry, Vanessa.
Yeah, it's not a very new story, but of course there's been a lot going on, both with Belinsky, of course, and also with one of the ambassadors that is working to fundraise for Ukraine, ostensibly. So basically, I wrote this up at my Substack. People can find it there from yesterday. Balenciaga, creative director, is ambassador for Zelensky's United 24 fundraiser. And as I put, the normalization of Nazis by fashion moguls, astronauts, and academics. You'll see why I said that in a moment. So, what is United 24? It was the initiative of the president of Ukraine. Unfortunately, he hasn't changed his clothes since February 2022, but he established it back in February, March to raise more funds, despite the billions that he's getting from the States and the EU and the UK. But one of his ambassadors is the creative director of Balenciaga, Demna Gavsalia. I'm sure that's mispronounced. Who's ambassador of President Zelensky's fundraising platform, United 24. Among others, of course, is Barbara Streisand. I'm sure Sean Penn is doing his bit to raise money for Zelensky and the Ukrainian Azov battalion and the Ida battalion, etc. And then let's have a look at Balenciaga. Of course, people will probably know that Balenciaga were recently the subject of some controversy. This is a headline in just one article talking about it. It was inappropriate. Balenciaga's creative director breaks the silence amid ad campaign controversy. Now, what was the ad campaign controversy was that children were effectively used for a photo shoot promoting Balenciaga teddy bear bags. The unfortunate thing were the teddy bear bags were dressed in bondage gear and wearing fishnet stockings and had very young children under the age of 10 holding them in the photographs. And in one photo, court documentation can be seen on the desk where the Balenciaga bag is placed from the 2008 case titled United States versus Williams. The controversial case ruled that the pandering of child pornography did not violate the First Amendment, even if the person charged with such an offense did already possess such pornography to trade. So Balenciaga were basically accused of sexualizing children, grooming children, and using children for child pornography. People might also remember, I was reminded on the Substack post about Azov films in Toronto in Canada in 2011 that were investigated by a Canadian police operation called Operation Spade. And they found amongst their portfolios 63 videos containing child pornography. They were shut down. And then in 2013, there was a sort of equivalent operation, which you also probably remember, also called Operation Spade in the UK. Interesting that Azov films were made in Eastern Europe, and with the name, one can safely speculate that they were being made in Ukraine. Just a little aside, but it connects into this, I think. So how much has Zelensky raised to date? Well, a very paltry sum of 237,850,771 through various methods. Why is this fundraiser important for both Ukraine and the world? Of course, he talks about the terrorists in Russia attacking essential civilian infrastructure. And we have a very similar kind of tagline to what we used to hear in Syria. They attack houses, schools, and hospitals, killing civilians. And he talks about millions of people have been left defenseless right before winter. And he's talking about the Shahed Hunter anti-drone systems. If the Shahed drones, which are from Iran, are not prevented, Ukraine will face a humanitarian catastrophe of unprecedented scale. All of this kind of hyperbole is very familiar to those that have followed any imperialist or NATO venture, including Iraq and Libya and Syria. But then look what he says here as the last point, which I sort of, it kind of reminded me of the way that Erdogan used to blackmail the EU with the refugee crisis. And here you have Zelensky basically claiming Ukraine cannot export electricity to the EU, which supports the stability of the European energy system. So effectively what he's saying, unless you fund me, to purchase anti-drone systems, you're not going to have electricity this winter. So the other point that I want to make here, of course, all of these funds that he's raising supposedly to rebuild Ukraine, and on the website there are a number of images of destroyed hospitals, destroyed schools. Of course, we know that the Azov battalions are occupying hospitals and schools, just as Al-Qaeda did in Syria, and that is why these particular buildings are often being targeted. In many cases, like the maternity hospital story, they're not even being used anymore as a maternity hospital. They're used solely as military headquarters. But I would almost guarantee, that the majority of these funds that are coming into Ukraine and to Zelensky are just going to disappear. Who's going to be auditing them? Who's going to ensure that they go where they're supposed to go? Just as we saw in Syria, the funds that were coming into multiple agencies here in Syria, and there is no accountability. There has never been an audit of the White Helmets, for example. And then let's listen to Claire Daly again in the European Parliament talking about exactly that, the money that's coming into Ukraine.
Billions of EU assistance going to Ukraine are not free, they're loans, which Ukraine will default on, and they come with neoliberal strings attached. If you listen to the economists, Ukraine is marked for a nightmare round of shock therapy, a sell-off of public land, deregulation of labour, sale of public assets, on it goes. The country's future is being sold to finance a proxy war that's tearing it apart. And of course the loans have preconditions that Ukraine must uphold democracy and rule of law, but since the tap was turned on, Zelensky has banned most opposition parties, shuttered the media, attacked trade unions and workers' rights, but the billions keep flowing. This is a country, our Court of Auditors have said, was a country accused of grand corruption. And on it goes while the EU policy seems designed to prevent peace and keep the war going at all costs as long as ordinary people pay. So between Russian tanks and European banks, there will be little left of Ukraine when this is over. Don't forget, war is a racket and there's going to be hell to pay for this one.
Well, strong words again from Claire Daly, absolutely on point, of course. Ukraine is effectively a failed state that's being kept afloat with the money laundering activities of NATO member states. But coming back to the fundraiser, what else is Zelensky looking to fund? A fundraiser that will become a game changer, join the formation of the world's first naval fleet of drones. So, he's basically not only asking for defense systems, which of course very much plays into the NATO narrative that Ukraine is defending itself against an aggressive Russian state, but he's obviously also looking for offensive weapon capability. Let's see what else he's advertising to raise money. This is Azov-style. It's an Azov-style bracelet, a symbol of perseverance. The bracelet that you see is made from the last pre-war batch and of steel manufactured at the legendary Azov-style plant, a symbol of incredible courage that tells the story of might and fortitude. It also tells the story of being occupied by the Azov battalion that, of course, now is being normalized and glorified by Western media that back in 2016 were raising outrage about the growth of far-right and neo-Nazism in Ukraine. Extraordinary to kind of see this complete reversal or inversion of reality. Of course, Mariupol is predominantly also pro-Russian. Then let's have a look at some of the other ambassadors. So here we have Timothy Snyder, a professor of history at Yale University, author of a book called Bloodlands, which ironically describes the oppression of the Hitler regime and, in his view, Stalin also. Now, he's directly involved. as an academic, one would assume that he would be involved in the rebuilding of hospitals, the rebuilding of schools, something that has a humanitarian flavor, right? No, in reality, he's raised 500,000 to buy the anti-drone system. Why does this academic consider that that is not a breach of academic ethics? He says, I'm a historian and a scholar, and in the long run, I want to be raising money to rebuild libraries, schools, and universities. But right now, we have to do what is more urgent, which is to raise money to help Ukraine defend itself from murderous drones. Extraordinary. Who else is involved as an ambassador? Astronaut Scott Kelly, who came to Ukraine, saw with his own eyes, this is taken from the website, how the doctors of the Madyit Children's Hospital work in the dark. In addition, Kelly visited Bucha and Irpin, met with Ukrainian pilots, and starred in a video supporting Ukrainian doctors. Then you have famous Canadian philanthropist James Temety transferred $1 million to the fund. So what does this remind you of, these celebrities and academics getting involved in a war that in reality the US is officially not involved in? You have an academic raising money for defense systems, military defense systems, in a foreign nation, where, as I say, the US is ostensibly not directly involved. Of course, we know that that isn't true. But let's look again at the 10 principles of war propaganda from Belgian historian Anne Morelli. And we see right there at number 8, recognized intellectuals and artists support our cause. It's the NATO imperialist playbook time and again, and these 10 principles can apply to every single operation, again in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, in Yugoslavia, and now in Ukraine.
Right, thank you very much for that, Vanessa. Now, just very briefly, if we could, let's just talk about SOF.
Yeah, I mean, this is extraordinary. I picked up on this actually this morning. On a Facebook friend had posted one of the images from this account. This is on their Instagram channel. So this is a Ukrainian fashion outlet called Sof Ukraine that are selling T-shirts and sweatshirts that are absolutely horrific. This is one of them, Russian baby for breakfast, with a baby being boiled in the pan there. If you look at the next one, Dad is Calling, who is Dad? Stepan Bandera, of course, genocidal mass murderer, carried out numerous pogroms against Jews and communists. And here you have T-shirts and sweatshirts extolling his virtues. And here, again, this sort of links into the whole Balenciaga fiasco also, because here you have a very young girl wearing a T-shirt with what that is, a cat, carrying a submachine gun. I'm not sure what make it is. And on the right, you have, again, images of violence, the babush, is it the babushka dolls? Being exploded. I mean, just extraordinary that this stuff is openly being sold. And you can find similar on Amazon, similar of the most popular kind of Syria and mail order websites, and yet nobody is shutting it down. And yet, you know, we have our Patreon accounts shut down for agreeing with scientific assessment of the dangers of vaccines. It's just, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, brilliant. Thank you for that, Vanessa. Let's move on, Patrick, then to freedom of speech and what's going on with Twitter.
Well, the Twitter files is probably the biggest political story in a lot of people's estimation, Mike, of the modern era, but it's just not getting any coverage. So as we learned last week, and as you reported as well, but now look, blacklists are being discovered. So there are actual blacklists. So the thing is, a lot of people weren't expecting that this data would ever see the light of day because A, they weren't expecting that Twitter was going to sell. So all this was going on. They were running riot, doing all this censorship, deplatforming, political targeting. So actual blacklists. Who knows whose names are on those blacklists? Maybe mine, other people we know. But certainly this is making some waves. So Jack Dorsey, the former head of Twitter, is weighing in on this. So he's challenging Elon Musk. So what's Dorsey saying? Dorsey's still an equity holder in Twitter, but he's no longer, CEO. He's not running the thing anymore. He's one of the founders of Twitter. He confronts Musk over the release of what he's calling unfiltered Twitter files. Here's what he said, challenging him on Twitter here. Elon Musk saying, looks like we need another day or so. Jack, here's Jack at Jack. If the goal is transparency, he's talking to Elon here, to build trust, why not just release everything without a filter and let the people judge for themselves, including all discussions around current and future actions. Make everything public now. Hashtag Twitter files. I mean, Mike, this is like, can you believe this is Jack Dorsey saying this? You need to be transparent. This all happened while Jack Dorsey
was chief executive,
was the CEO of Twitter. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's a bit rich. So Musk replies here to Jack. Oops, we went a little bit fast there. So Musk replies here, most important data was hidden from you too, he said, and some may have been deleted, but everything we find will be released eventually. So Musk is giving it to Matt Taibbi, who's an independent journalist, formerly with the Rolling Stone, and they're parsing it out. So why does the media do that with the Snowden files, with other stories, with other big stories? Because there's a certain strategy in releasing information, has a certain amount of impact, certain points. So if you dump it all at once, there is maybe a chance that a lot of it might end up getting lost in the wash. So Jack Dorsey is trying to protect his own interests, I think, and his own legacy, which is a horrible one. But it turns out, Mike, the reason they were slow walking this information to Musk, because the head counsel, legal counsel at Twitter, Jim Baker, is the former lawyer for the FBI who created and ran the whole Alpha Bank Russiagate side of the scandal. So this guy got taken on by Twitter. And then now Musk has come in, he's fired him 2 days ago.
Right.
He sacked Jim Baker, former FBI legal counsel, then head of Twitter legal counsel. He was gatekeeping all of this stuff. So you can see there's an absolute collusion between the US government, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and big tech to censor, and to deplatform, to remove tweets. And even the Biden administration in these emails, Mike, during the Arizona election with Kari Lake, Katie Hobbs governor, Democratic governor candidate, had pro-Kari Lake tweets removed. Those emails have been released. Biden, when he was running in 2020, his campaign was getting anti-Biden stuff or Hunter Biden material taken off Twitter. And so this was going on. So these are campaigns in elections using Twitter to censor the opposition. Yeah. This has been happening and consistently. Yeah. So that is the conclusion. So they can no longer take the private company defense. It's no longer valid because when the government colludes with big tech to deny the First Amendment or freedom of speech rights of people, you can no longer hide behind, oh, it's a private company. They can do what they want.
Which is what the UK government's trying to do with the latest updates to the online safety bill. It's not tenable.
And we'd love to see those emails, wouldn't we? The communications between the UK government and big tech. That certainly would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Indeed. Indeed. Okay, well, let's end with this then, because there's been some updates on what's been going on in the Netherlands with the Dutch farmers. So first of all, heavy-handed measures by the Dutch police to shut down farmers' protests against the government, who are threatening forced buyouts of 3,000 farms in an attempt to reduce nitrogen oxide emissions as mandated by the EU, is what the tweet says from James Melville. So, of course, the Dutch government wanting to buy and close down 3,000 farms near what they describe as environmentally sensitive areas. They are attempting to shut down also nitrogen pollution, is what they're claiming. So that's some of the footage. Here's some more footage from another Twitter feed with the big excavators, earth movers, whatever they are, trying to push the tractors out of the way. But as we'll see in a second on this particular clip, the guy who's standing in front of the officials heavy weaponry there is about to get dragged into a van by some plainclothes guys. So
the Dutch police are coming out with bulldozers and thugs, basically, unmarked vans with plainclothes thugs. They're supposedly police. I'm not sure. I think they'll show that in a second.
Well, they will do. So it is quite incredible that this continues to go on with very little coverage in the Western media, in the UK media at least.
Here's the paddy wagon and the football hooligans working for the police.
Yes.
Masks, everything, just grabbing people right off the street, throwing them in a van.
Now, the key point here is that the Netherlands is a particularly special country with respect to farming. Many people don't know this. They have a process called the Haber-Bosch process that they use for food production. And as a result of that process, farming in the Netherlands, rather, is the second largest food exporter in the world. This has massive implications for food availability, food security, not just in the Netherlands, but in Europe and the rest of the world. If the Netherlands starts to shut down its food production. But it's not just in the Netherlands. In the UK, farm leaders warn of huge contraction in UK food production. This is Farmers Weekly from a few weeks ago. We're seeing huge contraction in the protected crops sector. They're also seeing huge contraction in vegetables and fruits in the UK. And I left that see also at the top of that little insert there, food production and environment go hand in hand, says DEFRA Minister, because of course at the back of this, Patrick, is the Agenda 2030 and the various World Economic Forum, a Green New Deal, levelling up, whatever term you want to put on it, and so on. Also in the UK, we've got to remind ourselves, record avian flu outbreak sees 48 million birds killed in the UK and EU as slaughtered on suspicion progresses, and we're starting to see availability problems as a result. This is Birmingham Live. Supermarkets report stock shortages, but this isn't something that's new. This has been going on for a while. So this is back in 2021. Shops record lowest stock levels since 1983. The shortage could last until Christmas. And here's a more up-to-date article from July. Lidl says stock issues to blame for empty freezers and chillers. This continues to go on, not the Netherlands, not just the UK, also France. Let's do a quick translation of this. Stoppages in sight for food production. And basically, this is the canned food specialist Coflego, or I can't remember exactly what they're called, but anyway, 300 million euro turnover. They have temporarily shut down 4 of its 8 factories in France beginning on the 2nd of January. That's 80% of its production, and this is a result of the cost of energy. Okay, so this is the announcement that it's actually going to shut down most of their production. But if we move on to this, France sees soft wheat crop down 7% in this year. And so this is also the availability of food and so on going into the food production chain is also causing problems as well. But of course, what's the reason for it, Patrick? It's not government policy, it's conflict. Because as with health issues and hospitals not doing the jobs, that's not government policy, that's COVID does that. In this area, with energy or with food production, the reductions in availability are not because of government policy, they're because of conflict. We've got to make sure we remember that always.
And who's responsible for the conflict? Putin. Everybody say it all together. Putin, Vladimir Putin, it's his fault. Mike, the question is, if Europe can't produce food, or food production gets disrupted or reduced in Europe because they literally can't afford to either run factories, the government is shut downing farmlands, wanting to rewild farmlands, take the Dutch off the farmlands because of climate change goals, where's the food going to come from? It's going to have to get imported from somewhere, and it's going to be not cheaper, it's going to be more expensive. I dare say the quality will be less. And GMO will then be a major option. So those who are well invested in, like Monsanto and Mr. Gates and so forth, fake meat being produced elsewhere via soya crops or whatever, and that's going to get imported. So this is an interesting trend. Europe, the UK, not able to produce energy, not able to produce food, totally at the whims of external forces.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but 6 months or a year ago, maybe a bit longer, there were headlines about Bill Gates buying up huge quantities of farmland Now, as we see the small farmer being pushed out of the market, did Bill know something at that stage, do you think?
Well, that's why he's rich, Mike, because he's just that much smarter than everybody else. He knows where to park his money ahead of time because he foresees these things like pandemics. This is why he is the great entrepreneur and philanthropist that he is, Mr. Bill Gates.
Indeed. Vanessa, thoughts?
Well, also not forgetting that Zelensky sold off, I think it was 18 million hectares of Ukrainian arable land to the likes of Monsanto. So as I said, the majority of Ukraine doesn't belong to Ukraine anyway.
Yes.
But also, that's an interesting slot into what you've been talking about.
Thank you for that.
But the good news is, Mike, they're loosening up marijuana laws. So, if it's all too much for you and the stress is too much, you can just
have a smoke.
You can get stoned. And maybe even Rishi will have a voucher for that this winter. So there's something to look forward to.
Okay, well, on that note, we've got to leave it for today. We'll be back in a couple of minutes for some extra on the main live stream. But otherwise, we'll see you at 1 p.m. on Monday. Hope everyone has a great weekend. See you then. Bye-bye.